many schools were not taking enough time to understand the principles of curriculum design or develop a whole school strategy before making any changes. A few schools, including some pioneer schools, found that this piecemeal approach had led to a disjointed curriculum and meant that initial plans might have to be unpicked and progress overall was slowed. As a result, leaders returned to their whole school vision, the principles of curriculum design, and to establishing a whole school strategy for curriculum reform. It was for this very reason that our last webinar focused on the importance of establishing a whole school vision for teaching and learning, and on the importance of the quality of teaching. So today, we turn our attention to trialling and evaluating new learning activities. When we visited schools, we found that in many schools, staff have been energised by the flexibility the new curriculum offers and its creative possibilities. Once schools have established their vision for teaching and learning and evaluated their current provision, they began to trial aspects of curriculum design and pedagogy and evaluate and refine these trials. The starting point for schools in planning for these trials was varied. A majority started with the 4 purposes, others with the statements of what matters, and some started by improving the quality of teaching. Many schools visited were beginning to pay attention to developing authentic curriculum experiences that enable pupils to realise the 4 purposes and support their development of knowledge, skills, and experiences. This approach allows pupils to explore, discuss, and construct ideas in contexts that involve real-world problems and projects that are relevant to them. As learning activities are planned, teachers placed importance on genuine opportunities rather than forced connections. Teachers spoke of thinking as much about what not to include or what belongs elsewhere, as well as what is most relevant. In one school visited, there's now an expectation that planning for every unit of work will have links to authentic learning experiences that are of value to all pupils. Where schools have used this authentic approach as a focus for improving teaching and learning, it works best when they ensure that activities are appropriately challenging and the focus on learning a subject skill is not lost. So these were the findings in our initial report, and I'm now going to pass back to Alan, who's going to update you on our more recent findings.
Thank you, Michelle. And as you all know, we've continued with our engagement visits and phone calls with schools during the last 12 months. And I'd like to share with you now some of the more recent findings from our summer and autumn term visits. Michelle mentioned that some schools we visited as part of the thematic did tell us that they rushed too quickly to developing the content of their curriculum. On our engagement visits, we still talked to schools where they talked about where they'd moved too quickly towards this content without considering their vision well enough first. In these cases, and we have mentioned this in previous webinars, sometimes schools had moved too quickly to approaches such as thematic approaches or grouping subject disciplines together too quickly. And what we found is this often led to superficial approaches to learning. And because learning hadn't been thought of initially, there were links being made between subjects, disciplines, and areas that weren't always making sure pupils made the best progress. And these schools told us they had to take a step back and rethink the design process. Michelle also mentioned that schools have focused closely on improving teaching as their main driver for curriculum change in some instances. And some of these schools have used the 12 pedagogical principles as their starting point. However, at times, the work around the 12 pedagogical principles has often been superficial and merely involved considering what the principles mean and if teachers understood the meaning beneath them. In the most effective cases, schools have looked beyond these principles and considered their approach to effective teaching in their school. These leaders understand well the strengths and areas for development in teaching in their schools, and they ensure that their professional learning links closely to this. They've ensured that they've helped teachers to move beyond thinking about how they might teach, to also helping them think how they might enact that practice in their classrooms. In addition to this, where we see strong practice, leaders recognise the importance of subject-specific pedagogies, and they enable their subject leaders and teachers to consider how they will secure progress through strong teaching in their own discipline, and then where appropriate, across an area of learning and experience. In a few schools, they've not always made the link between strong teaching and successful curriculum delivery. In these examples, leaders have moved teachers to developing their curriculum without first supporting them to develop their approaches to teaching. And this often results in a low quality curriculum design process, as teachers are not supported well enough to think about the learning that pupils need from the outset of their planning. And in these cases, we tend to see a series of tasks that are planned that don't enable pupils to make sufficient progress or to build on their prior learning. We have had a number of interesting conversations with school leaders and teachers about the purpose-driven curriculum. And in a few cases, we've heard of the misconception that the purpose-driven curriculum only means developing pupils towards the 4 purposes. In these cases, staff have not developed a deep enough understanding that all learning should be underpinned by a clear purpose, in line with developing subject knowledge, skills, and understanding. While learning experience should enable pupils to develop towards the 4 purposes, it should also enable them to make progress in the subject, discipline, or aspect they're learning about. I'd like to mention one last barrier that schools have talked to us about. And this is where schools haven't focused enough from the outset of what they want their pupils to learn, and in particular, the learning that their pupils need to be successful in their curriculum and when they leave school. And by that, I mean, after their visioning work, schools have not always taken the time to consider the knowledge, skills, and experiences their pupils will need to succeed. In the best examples, we see leaders and staff in schools thinking about the knowledge, skills, and experiences that their pupils need at a disciplinary level to support them to think about how that learning becomes coherent over time and how they can make those links within and across areas of learning experience. That enables them to think carefully about the learning that will take place to build their coherent curriculum. That's not to say that things have to be done in this order, but our early engagement with schools has found that leaders are saying this approach supported them well to think how they will build a progressive and meaningful curriculum that ensures all learning in their school is underpinned by a clear purpose. And obviously no 2 schools journey will be the same, but we do hope that from some of the findings we shared with you at the beginning, that you have found something you can take away to help as you continue to design your approach to your curriculum design and delivery.